Welcome to the Unfiltered Podcast with host Mike D'Alessandro and Jeff Angelo. Unfiltered is based in Clark County, Washington, and is focused on discussing local news and politics. This is episode 4, and our guest is Tony Golik. And now for the unreal, unrated, unequaled Clark County podcast, Unfiltered.
Welcome to Unfiltered. I'm Mike D'Alessandro along with Jeff Angelo. Jeff, how's it going?
Doing great today.
Awesome. You're always doing great, man.
I am. I'm excited today. So our guest today is Tony Golik. He's a Clark County prosecuting attorney. I've known him for a while now. Great guy. I wish our community would get to know him a little bit better.
To interrupt you, do you know him because you've committed a crime? Or...
I don't think I don't think our relationship we should talk about.
Okay.
No, I met Tony. Honestly, he was walking down the street one day, and I've seen him around before, so I just honestly introduced myself, and I will tell you momentarily there, I think he got a little nervous, wasn't sure who I was going to turn out to be. And coming from a prosecuting attorney, I think I understand that. But it was good, and we've talked many times since on a personal level, but rarely have we ever talked too much on a professional level about himself. So today, it's going to be, I think, a great opportunity to do that.
Well, hi, Jeff. Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Jeff, I recall that time that we met on the street corner in downtown Vancouver, and I was not at all scared or off-put when we first met, and I've enjoyed talking to you.
Not a terrifying individual.
No. I've enjoyed talking to you every time since, so I'm looking forward to chatting with you today.
We have fun. So, Tony, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into what you're doing now?
Sure. So I came here to Clark County in 2000.
What brought you here?
So I grew up in this area, and it was really just wanting to get back to this area with the family. We have 2 boys, and families from this area. So
we meaning you and your wife?
Wife and I, lovely wife Kathy and I. And
there we go. I was hoping you might give her a plug.
Yes, my lovely wife Kathy Golik.
There you go.
So we wanted to get back to this area, and had been intending on angling back here after law school. So like say in 2000, came here to the Clark County Prosecutor's office, and worked in really almost all the units of the criminal division of the prosecutor's office. And by 2003, I was back to doing major crimes work here. So doing pretty much all Class A felonies, specializing in homicide cases. And then from 2003 to 2010, I was doing that, and at that time, our long-term prosecutor, Art Curtis, decided that after 30 years, he was going to go ahead and retire. So I decided to run, and ran in 2010, was elected in the fall of 2010, took office January of 2011, and I'm about halfway through my second 4-year term now as the prosecutor here in Clark County.
So you'll have re-election coming up soon.
In 2018.
2018. So next year.
Right.
And you plan on running again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're not retiring quite yet.
I have no intention of retiring now. I'm very invested in the job, love the work, and plan to be the prosecutor here in Clark County for as long as the citizens will have me.
That is fair. So,
I bet a lot of people don't know what the Clark County Prosecutor does, so why don't we start off by asking you just exactly that. What do you do?
That's a good one. What does the prosecutor do?
Yeah.
So I think it's helpful to look at what the office does in answering that question.
Okay.
So the county prosecutor's office is charged with prosecuting all felony cases that happen countywide and all misdemeanor cases that occur within unincorporated Clark County. And the prosecutor's office is also charged with giving advice to county departments and defending the county in legal actions. And then we also are charged with litigating child support cases in our child support unit. So we have, there's 110 employees in the prosecutor's office, 50 deputy prosecutors, 60 support staff.
So big office.
It's a big office, yeah. So when you ask, what do I do? I think a lot of people think, oh, he goes to court every day and prosecutes cases. I do still do that work. I try to have one criminal case at a time, usually a murder or attempt murder type case. And then the rest of my time is spent running this large prosecutor's office. So we have all the different criminal divisions handling about 2,500 felony cases per year. That's been our average over the last 3 years, another 5,000 misdemeanors. And then working with our civil division, which is, I think people that are paying attention have noticed that our civil division's been in the paper a little more than normal over the last few years. There's been a lot of work there. So a lot of meetings, a lot of personnel oversight, a lot of policy work, and a lot of also just assisting the attorneys, particularly on the larger cases that we're doing, on the day-to-day decision making on large important cases in our office. So when you ask what do I do each day, it really changes day by day. One day I could be in meetings at our Children's Justice Center all day, or at our over in our civil division for most of the day. Another day I could actually be working on a case that I'm prosecuting. So it really varies depending on what's going on a given day and what the priority of the office is at the time.
So that is a lot to be dealing with. I didn't realize how much you actually did. I thought you just walked the streets and cleaned up crime.
But I have very little time for doing that. I try to get out and do that once in a while, but I'm really not good at it.
That's good. Well, that day I saw him on the street. He had a broom and he was just sweeping up crime.
And I was just drawn to you.
He was. He actually hit me with it afterwards. So
I think I was going to Subway, actually.
You probably were.
I think that's what I was doing, yeah.
That's probably where Jeff was going to.
Down at the Angelo building.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So one of the things, a couple things that we've talked about in the past that I know is a big deal in my home because my wife works in this field is the therapeutic drug courts. So what is your office's stand on the therapeutic drug courts? Like, what is your office doing with the therapeutic drug courts, and how are you guys making a difference in the community?
So our office is supportive of therapeutic drug courts. The prosecutor's office has had a long-term commitment here in Clark County to therapeutic courts, to drug court. Drug court was up and around long before I became the elected prosecutor. We had drug court back in Spokane County.
Real quick point of just to get some
what is
drug court? Let's answer that first.
That's a good starting point. So drug court is it's a type of therapy court that's used nationwide, statewide and nationwide, by courts and prosecutors' offices, where cases are diverted out of, instead of the defendant going to jail or prison, they go into a lengthy, usually year-long, heavy supervision treatment program where they are monitored by usually DOC, prosecutor's office, and defense attorney, and particularly the judge that's running the drug court. It's basically choosing to go to treatment, heavy monitoring and treatment, and then on successful treatment, going that route rather than just going into county jail or in sometimes prison. That's generally what the drug court model is.
So back to how your office kind of ties in there and the steps that you guys are taking to further promote, I guess, the drug court.
Yeah, so that's something that I've been pretty proactive in since I've been fortunate enough to serve as the prosecutors. I've tried to increase participation in drug court. In our county, before I took office, the way drug court always worked was a person had to plead guilty to the felony charge. It's usually a drug possession charge. And then rather than going to jail, They would go through the treatment program and then on successful completion, not have to go to jail, but still end up with a felony conviction. One of the first changes that I made when I took office was implemented a policy where if a person had 0, 1, or 2 prior felony convictions and their case was a simple possession case, we made the offer that if they go to drug court and successfully complete, we'll dismiss the case. I wanted to do that to give more incentive for people that didn't have significant criminal history, but did have drug addiction issues, to go into drug court rather than just take what normally would be an offer if somebody had maybe 2 prior felonies and a simple possession. Oftentimes our office, our standard type offer would be maybe 45 days in jail. And I noticed that a lot of people in that set of circumstances, they wouldn't go that difficult drug court option. They just decide to, take the offer and sit the time out in county. Because usually, they'd already done maybe 15 days by the time our deputy prosecutor would get the offer to them. So they'd have, maybe another week or 2 in jail and then some work crews, usually how the sentence would go. So I think the defense attorneys were, saying to their clients, hey, you can, take the plea and not much more time, or this really labor-intensive, difficult treatment program. So I want to give more people incentive to go into drug court, as a way of trying to change those people's lives and
And it's a big deal. I mean, it's
Right.
not like just this little thing. From what the comparisons I have got, is it's like going to college for a year, basically. Like you're graduating college at the end. It's a huge deal for the families out there.
Absolutely.
And what is the cost comparison? I mean, if you have it, that'd be great, or is some ballpark between having that person in jail for a year versus being in drug court for a year? Does it save the taxpayer money on that end?
Yeah. So if you just looked at straight year of incarceration versus year of drug court, it would certainly be cheaper for a person to go, to a taxpayer to go through drug court. A lot of times, people aren't actually looking at an entire year of jail; they're looking at less time. So it really depends on the case. Sometimes drug court might actually be more just expensive. Sometimes it might be less expensive, depending on how much time the person would have been serving, depending on their criminal history. However, I think the cost savings that we were really looking at with drug court is trying to change people's lives and get them to stop committing crime.
Well, the rate of recidivism has to be
Exactly.
lower.
It's a significantly lower rate of recidivism for those that successfully complete drug court. And that's really pretty intuitive. If somebody commits a crime, they go do a little time in county, they get out, they're probably just going to go back to their same lifestyle.
Exactly.
And, they're more likely to, commit another offense, commit another drug offense, which leads to property crimes, thefts, burglaries, car theft, all that sort of stuff. And then sometimes violent crime also. Whereas if they go through this really difficult program of drug court and buy into it and successfully complete, certainly not everybody, is perfect afterwards. Some people make mistakes. There certainly is still recidivism, but it's definitely a much lower rate, and much less likely that we're going to incur the societal cost of another arrest, another incarceration, another prosecution if we can get people to go into drug court and successfully complete it.
So tied into drug court then, what have been the effects to, I guess, the amount of people that have been put in a position where they can choose to go through drug court or not since the legalization of marijuana, recreational use in Washington?
Well, we certainly had a lot of people that were charged with, felony possession of marijuana that would go through drug court. I would say, it hasn't had a really large impact on drug court necessarily. I know that when marijuana was legalized, there was a lot of, oh gosh, there's going to be, so far fewer cases than prosecutor's office. Yeah, that was one type of crime. Like I say, we charge about 2,500 felonies per year, and the way we charge those cases, they're investigated by law enforcement agencies and referred to our office to make charging decisions. So we don't have those felony marijuana cases, and so that leads to you don't have those type cases. going through drug court, but there's still plenty of cases and plenty of cases for drug court.
Who then with drug court, what parties are involved then in making that final decision with drug court?
So the prosecutor's office has the initial screening decision on whether we refer cases to drug court, and then once if our office looks at a case and decides it's appropriate to send it to drug court for screening, then it goes to the drug court team, which is we have one of our deputy prosecutors in drug court. There's Department of Corrections, treatment provider, defense attorney, and the drug court judge, and the team looks at the case and the facts of that case and then makes a decision whether the team thinks it's an appropriate case for drug court. I would say most of the time when our office refers the case for drug court, the drug court team will accept the case into drug court.
And most of the time, the individual opts in.
Right. We don't send a case for drug court screening unless we first talk with the defense attorney and find out that the individual does in fact want to go to drug court.
I was going to say, that's a lot of time to be dealing with it and then have the person be like, no, I'm good in jail.
Right,
cool.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to invest all of that time in screening a case for drug court only to hear, gosh, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, thanks, but no thanks.
That's usually one of the first things that we want to find out.
Well, and our county seems to be very proactive in the direction that I think you've taken your office here. There's a lot of those harm reduction resources out in our community, such as needle exchanges. That's very good for our community. I mean, having those resources available does create proactive routes for these people who have a tough time not kicking their habits, I guess, would be what I'm trying to go with here. Sure, yeah. But it's a great thing. I think you're going the right route. I mean, maybe there's some people. What do you say to the people out there who say, Tony Golik is too soft on crime?
That's not something you hear very often.
Except from me.
I don't think you're saying that either. So it's interesting when we made that change that I was just talking about dismissing a class of cases. And I will say also that we are right now in the middle of finalizing policy to actually increase that and dismiss even more Class C nonviolent cases for those people that only have 0, 1, 2, or 3 priors, to try to incentivize even more of those same sort of people in the same sort of circumstance I was just talking about to go into drug court for the same reasons that I discussed just now. I'm going to answer your question in a roundabout way here. The folks that have a lot more priors, we don't need to offer that dismissal because they're looking at more jail or prison time, so they've got the incentive to go into drug court. When we made that change initially, the offer of dismissing cases, I really questioned how the community would react to that, and I talked about doing that when I was initially running for office. Because there's a big change. Our office traditionally, it had always been the person has to plead guilty and have that guilty plea and a conviction when they go through drug court. But I think there was, an understanding by everybody that we want to try to divert people who haven't committed violent crimes. Mostly they're hurting themselves. They're probably committing property crimes because of drug addiction. We want to get those people into a successful treatment program, because if we don't, we're just going to keep spending taxpayer resources on throwing them in county jail, and just, they go in, they get out, they do it again, they go in, they get out, they a little longer each time, the next thing they're going to prison, and we're not accomplishing anything until they age out of crime in their, sometime in their 50s when they get tired of doing it after stealing lots of cars, breaking into people's houses.
That's retirement age, about 50.
Yeah, that's a common retirement age.
I wasn't sure what the retirement on crime was.
It's not a per se retirement age, but you do see people that get tired of that lifestyle. So getting back to your question, that kind of challenge. Hey, are we being too soft on crime? I don't think people think that approach is a soft on crime, and we're only doing that on appropriate cases where there's no violence, you don't have somebody that's hurt, Oftentimes, particularly in the straight possession cases, the offenders are mostly just hurting themselves.
Yeah.
And we really have a very different approach on crimes where people are violent and they hurt people, rapes, child abuse cases. We take a different tact on those type cases,
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned a focus on what we can do to help with nonviolent crime offenders to help them better their lives. So I do want to ask you about the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative and its impacts on nonviolent youth in our community, and what are the benefits to this approach? Maybe explain what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, JDI.
JDI for short.
Yeah,
right?
JDI for short.
Sounds like Jedi kind of.
Yeah,
I think it was Roy Vallo gave me that one.
If I had been the person to come up with I would have gone with Jedi. So,
Jedi.
But I didn't come up with it. I agree that would have been way cooler, but I didn't come up with it. It's a pretty well established program, and the concept is for nonviolent youthful offenders, kids, to try to divert them out of going into detention, juvenile jail, and try to divert them into treatment options, pro-social programs, instead of just, taking kids that commit, oftentimes misdemeanors, definitely nonviolent cases.
Like theft.
Yeah, theft,
like
that sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely, theft. Drug possession cases, lots of those. The concept is really at its core is that you should use detention, which is juvenile jail, when you have to, because you don't have another option. And we certainly have juvenile cases where unfortunately, that's the facts of the matter, and they've committed a violent act, and you have to use detention or the juvenile institution. But there are lots and lots of crimes that kids commit, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, where the youth is better served by not just putting them in juvenile jail. I'm a believer that just putting kids in juvenile jail is usually not going to be a positive influence on the life of that child. Again, sometimes you have to do it, but if you can divert them out of that route and into our juvenile recovery court, which is basically the same as drug court but for kids, or into other pro-social programs, that's going to be a better outcome. It's been interesting, and just in my career as a prosecutor, sort of watching the evolution of juvenile court. When I started in the mid-'90s, there was kind of a lock-em-up mentality, and it was certainly that way here in Clark County. I think when I first came here, a lot of kids were being declined from the juvenile system into the adult system, 16-year-olds. That happens, really infrequently now, really just on violent cases where the law calls for a mandatory decline. So there's much less of that, and really more of an attitude in our juvenile justice system that it's appropriate to really try to work to keep kids out of detention and use detention more sparingly when you don't have any other option.
Now, what would be, because I'm kind of envisioning this in my mind, as an example, a kid has a drug possession, goes into the courts, JDI is the option. Where would they potentially go to do some of this stuff?
Yeah, so you're looking at, in a case like that, trying to divert the kid into juvenile recovery court, again, similar to adult drug court. Also, we have weekend reporting, which is where we have kids go to Boys and Girls Club, going and spending time there under supervision, community service, restitution, all of those things, and monitoring, rather than just take that case and have the kid go do a week in detention.
I think that's great. I think it's really great. Back in a previous life,
This isn't going to go down a road that we don't want to go down as a Jeff.
I used to do loss prevention for Fred Meyer. and we predominantly were arresting females between the ages of 14 and 16.
Right.
And they were white females, 14 to 16 years old, middle class, stealing makeup. A lot of it, because they're small little makeup's the smallest little items in the world.
Sure.
So we would arrest them, and their parents would come. They would cry to us for a while, but ultimately, if there was a certain dollar value, we wound up sending them to court. And I never knew what route they would go after that. I mean, I hope they turn out okay. But in the back of my head, I was always like, it would be silly in my mind to toss them into a detention center for a $250 theft. And I think in Washington, if it's $750 or over, it's a felony.
Right. Yeah, I would say 15, 20 years ago, a case like that, a 16-year-old girl would be likely to spend some time in detention.
Isn't that crazy?
Juvenile jail, yeah. And, I think now it would be highly unlikely that a case like that, that a kid would spend time in juvenile jail.
Stupid kids.
Right. Kids make mistakes. I think we all realize that many of us have kids. Some of them are teenagers. And they're all going to be members of our community. And we want them to be good members of our community. We're not gonna save everybody. That stuff will still happen. Mm-hmm. But if we can do our best to identify the ones that we can divert out early on and try our best to move them into a different path, it's going to be a better outcome for the kid, and it's going to be a much better outcome for Clark County because they're going to be here for a long time.
So to follow up, to dovetail on that, then, are we seeing this sort of effort with nonviolent crimes nationwide?
Yes, the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative is a national movement. And it really depends, though, state by state and county by county, how much buy-in there is to the concept. I mean, even within our state, county by county, there's 39 counties, 39 different prosecutors. Mm-hmm. So some of them might be still more of the opinion that detention's a good thing for kids. You hear that sometimes. Oh, you got to give them that time out. Well, I am more of the opinion that you do that when you have to, when you don't have any other options. But you really try to exhaust other options with kids that have committed nonviolent offenses before using that last option, and then also really just trying to use that in situations where kids commit violent offenses, and then you have to use that option still.
So just I'm curious now, with juveniles, are they also given psychiatric but therapy? I mean, are they going through a process where there's a lot of times there may be some issues going on that they also need to work through if they're going to get better?
Yeah, I mean, that really depends case by case. Our juvenile department in Clark County, I think, really does a good job. We have a mental health provider on staff for the juvenile department for kids that need it. Our probation officers and the whole staff over at juvenile, I think they are very much of the mindset of trying to help the youth, kind of in the manner that I've been talking about here, and they're very good at their job, and I think they're well equipped to do the things you're talking about. If it's addiction issues, mental health issues, they I think do a good job in assessing what issues a youth has, and then getting the treatment that they need.
I think it's important. I mean, the whole idea is to get them through a program where they're going to not be back, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the other option is, sort of that other way of thinking, the punitive approach with kids would be, they committed a crime. How much time are they going to spend in detention? Well, it just doesn't work that well with kids. They're kids. They're going to get out. It's just a matter of how long, and then what's their where are they going to be mentally when they get out? if you just throw them in detention with a bunch of other kids that are in detention, they get used to detention, and then that is a good way to get them used to jail, which gets them used to prison, and nothing good happens there.
It's a cycle.
Right.
Where were you when I was a teenager? Could have used you. I was awful. I was the worst teenager. My parents still don't like me.
Sorry, Jeff.
So are they.
I feel like I let you down now.
So, Tony, let's move into some other stuff that you're kind of passionate about that still ties into your work here a little bit. You're a superhero, right? When you're not at work a little bit.
I don't think so. No.
I'm pretty sure I have written down here superhero accolades.
Your words, not mine.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us about the Elder and Children's Justice Leagues of superheroes? Well, am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, it's so we have the Elder Justice Center and the Children's Justice Center.
There you go.
The term league is not. I think you coined that just now. So all right. So these are examples of different approaches. You were asking earlier. My perspective, our office's perspective, are we soft on crime? And I would say no. The term that I like to use is smart on crime, which is trying to do the things that we're talking about with drug courts and juvenile courts, but then also effectively prosecuting people that victimize kids at our Children's Justice Center and seniors at our Elder Justice Center. I'll talk briefly about the Children's Justice Center first. So the Children's Justice Center is actually something that my predecessor, Art Curtis, was one of the instigators of 25 years ago here in Clark County. And we had one of the first Children's Justice Centers in the state here. The concept of the Children's Justice Center is to take a teamwork approach to prosecuting child abuse cases. And when I say child abuse cases, I'm talking about mostly sexual abuse cases and also physical abuse cases, all felony level abuse cases. And that teamwork approach concept is to have prosecutors that specialize in those cases, law enforcement officers, detectives that are well trained and specialize in those cases, victim advocates that specialize in these cases, along with CPS on staff, medical provider for children, and mental health provider for children, and then a director for the center. And have all these people together focusing on child abuse cases. It's a much more effective way of handling these oftentimes difficult and always very important cases, rather than, and we're fortunate to have this center here in our county, because it's much better than a situation where if you had, where you didn't have that co-location and specialization. Can you imagine a situation where a child is abused? They tell their teacher at school, and then they just have a patrol officer in uniform who doesn't really know how to do these kind of cases and talk to kids. Come out and talk to a kid about this horrible, very, very difficult thing to talk about, and then a prosecutor who isn't co-located with that officer, who does one of these cases a year, regular advocate that doesn't specialize. You can kind of see where I'm going. Not the best approach versus getting everybody together, all trained up, all know how to do these cases, all know the issues of the cases. It's a much better approach, and I've been fortunate to serve as the chair of the CJC board since I've been the county prosecutor, and it's a very, very important piece of our office, and something that I'm really proud of the work of our team in the prosecutor's office and our whole Children's Justice Center.
Do you feel that this has been part of I'll call it the program, but part of what happens in the office since you've been around? Do you feel that this is a better tool for your office to not only, to help the children, but to also prosecute?
Oh, absolutely. getting back to that, scenario I was talking about, if you had, officers that weren't trained detectives that didn't specialize in these kind of cases.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the same thing if you had prosecutors that weren't, highly trained in these areas and, didn't specialize in these kind of cases. Well, we'd get just worse outcomes in those cases, and also it would be worse for the children that go through it. It's much better to have this center that is, child friendly.
Mm-hmm.
We use a forensic interviewer to interview the kids. She does it in a setting that's friendly to the child there at the center. She knows how to ask questions that are not leading questions to get the truth. That's her goal is to get the truth of what occurred, and not just kind of lead the child down a path to try to get some sort of a particular statement. So trying to get the best evidence, and we're much more successful in achieving justice in those cases. In winning cases at trial. When people commit really horrible acts against children. So it's a much more effective approach. Effective in that it's better for the child to have this child friendly as you can be. When you're having to do this kind of work.
Yeah.
Easy access to mental health services for the child. Medical access to the child. A lot of times they need access to the medical services. So much better for the children when they have to go through this really, really difficult process of talking about this sort of stuff, and sometimes having to talk to a jury or a judge about this sort of stuff. And much more effective at finding out what happened, getting to the truth of the matter in these cases, and effectively and justly prosecuting these cases. So it's I'm absolutely convinced it's the best way to go for these type of cases.
And with the elder,
so the Elder Justice Center, like I said, we have had our Children's Justice Center here in Clark County for over 25 years now. When I ran for office in 2010, one of the things I talked about was creating an Elder Justice Center. For quite some time here in Clark County, and really nationally, there's been a discussion about problems with seniors being abused.
financial abuse, physical abuse,
all
incorporated.
All of the above.
Okay.
Financial certainly is the most common, financial abuse.
Yes.
But certainly physical abuse also cases. So if you go back 30 years ago, before there was a Children's Justice Center, I think there was sort of a feeling among law enforcement, prosecutors, society, does this really happen to kids? It wasn't talked about much. And then by the justice system, it was kind of like, these are really hard cases. We don't know how to do those. And then there was a realization, 25, 30 years ago, this is happening, happens a lot. It's really bad. We really need to work on, how we're going to do it. And, so that model is the model that was created and has, been proven to be very successful. Same thing happened with elder abuse. Well over a decade ago now, there was a realization, hey, a lot of our seniors are being abused. Seniors sometimes become vulnerable. We all are likely to become vulnerable, at the very end, toward the end of our lives. There were a lot of cases that it was pretty clear seniors were being abused, but we were lacking in a cohesive approach on how to handle those cases. And it was kind of that same thing where there was a realization that it's happening a lot. Difficult cases, especially the financial ones, kind of hard to parse out, took a lot of investigation. So there's a lot of similarities. So like I said, I said we need to create an Elder Justice Center when I was running for office in 2010, and we need to really look at that proven model on how we investigate and prosecute child abuse cases and use that same model in elder abuse cases. And we've done that here in Clark County.
And again, it's a group,
it's very
cohesive group scenario.
Exactly, very similar to the Children's Justice Center. I'd like to take full credit. I really can't, because I really just stole the model from the Children's Justice Center and said we need to do the same thing. So we opened the Elder Justice Center in the fall of 2011, and I sit as the chair of the board for the Elder Justice Center. And so now we have dedicated prosecutor, a dedicated detective. We have APS, Adult Protective Service, there in the center. And when I say center, it sounds really cool. It's actually the basement of the prosecutor's office. We started it in the fall of 2011, and we were just starting to try to dig out of the the financial crisis that we'd all gone through. So we started it without really any additional cost to taxpayers. No additional budget. We just Vancouver Police, our office, Adult Protective Service. We just took these individuals that existed, got them into training, got the co-location together to focus on these cases, and it's definitely proven to be an effective technique for prosecuting these important cases.
So, what about the funding for it now? Is it still, there doesn't need to be any funding, or there is a funding stream?
So we are still working, I would like to see additional detective resources. There's been efforts in Olympia to fully fund our Elder Justice Center and get it going as a pilot statewide. At this point, it really has been in existence since like I say, the fall of 2011. It's not as big as I would like. I don't think it should be as big as our Children's Justice Center. We definitely have a lot more of those type cases. At this point, it's staffed with one full-time detective, one full-time prosecutor, an advocate, usually 1 to 2 APS workers. It was staffed up at 1.5 detectives. I'd like to see it staffed at 2 full-time detectives. I think that would be the appropriate staffing. And I've been in lots of discussions with our Sheriff Chuck Atkins about having him staff a full-time sheriff detective, and I think his plan is to try to get that done hopefully this summer, and then we'd be at what I would consider appropriate full staffing for our EJC.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks. I think we'll get that done.
We really appreciate you sharing some real detail about what work your office does. I think it's we're hoping that people listening to this will get a better understanding. And that's why we brought you on. It's important work, and
one thing I want to point out here before we move on, I've been making little notes, and you guys laughed at me when I talked about Tony and his superhero accolades.
Okay.
So I want to just say real quickly, going back to the Children and Elder Justice Centers. So when regular police go to a school and there's a potential crime and they have to call upon another group of people to help out with that crime, and the goal of this is to seek justice. Okay, so now we're going to say that's not a Justice League, like a superhero league at all.
All right,
Come on.
All right, I see where you're going there.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I've been writing all these notes here across the top, going, sounds like a superhero league.
Especially if they went to a little league event, so then you get the word league in there.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. We got to tie it all together.
I'm helping you out, Jeff.
I appreciate it. I've seriously been taking notes the entire time. So the very last thing here, we just kind of... Well, first of all, I want to thank you for coming out here.
Absolutely.
Extremely informative. There's a lot of interesting stuff that you talked about that I've never thought about before. But maybe I should. But there's a few events in the community that... I definitely want to get to. Mike, do you have anything else on your mind here?
No, I just want to thank Tony for coming out today, and I want to echo what Jeff said. I think it's what the work you do obviously is so important, And I think that the big reason why we wanted to have you on is an opportunity to share that work with people so they understand what you do and honestly how the work you're doing is helping prevent crime as well.
Yeah, you really do a great job.
Well,
and
thank you, gentlemen.
And
so nice
we
to hear.
can continue to be friends at this point.
Great, thanks.
It's the only thing he came here for.
At the heart of it, really. That's
So, lastly, I just want to remind people, I haven't even said it yet, but I'll go ahead and remind people, if you do sign up for Fred Meyer Rewards online, the donations from Fred Meyer Rewards program can be directed to Lifeline Connections to fund programs that treat substance use disorders. So I just had to put it out there. It is a part of our community. It is a social issue. And it's one that I hope we can solve as a whole. It may take a long time. The other things coming up in the near future here is Saturday, February 25th at 11 a.m. There is a healthcare rally at Clark College.
Okay.
Then also on February 28th, it is the 28 days rally that they're holding. It's not a rally, it's more of a get-together at the Garage Bar and Grill. What they're doing is taking donations for feminine hygiene products for homeless women in the community. Donations also being accepted at the Dems office locally off of Coxley Drive up until the 28th. But I'm sure that you can still give after that point, and we will get it to the right people.
we have a donation bin in the prosecutor's office also
There
for
you go.
That is
28
perfect.
days. So if you want to swing by the prosecutor's office
You'll say hi to them. You'll come if you're around. You'll say
to
hello.
make a donation there also.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for being a part of the podcast. Thank you again, Tony. And from us at Unfiltered, myself and Mike D'Alessandro, thank you for listening.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
Thank you.
The Unfiltered Podcast is sponsored by the Clark County Democrats. Thank you for listening.